Hello friends, today in the series of welding lectures I will be talking to you about the various destructive, non-destructive and visual tests we perform on the welding. So let us first start with the visual inspection. As we have discussed during our earlier welding areas or lectures, is that welding will create a newly formed material, and therefore there could be a chance that there has a non-conformance or a imperfection inside the weld. Similarly, whenever we are going to do any forming or machining, you always try to avoid sharp corners unless it is essential as per the design, and we try to give a very smooth generous radius so that there is no stress concentration, and the cross sections when they are varying we try to give with a proper taper or a transition so that once again the stresses are smoothly able to move or adjust themselves rather than having a concentration at a particular given point. So the first inspection on the weld as it starts getting deposited is how is the look. That means, is there any oxide, any foreign particles, any impurities which are seen on the top of the weld. So it's a more of a visual inspection which is being done first. Welder is supposed to do it immediately after he completes the weld, and then he is going to apply wire brush to remove a thin layer of oxide which is many times will form. It is inevitable, and even if we have a proper flux or a gaseous atmosphere, a thin layer of oxide is going to form because we are not able to protect the entire surface. So once the wire brushing or initial cleaning is being done, you are now really ready to inspect the weld surface with the naked eye, and then you look for the profile, how the reinforcement has come up. Is it having too flat, too sharp, or is it just uniform like we have a speed breaker? A good speed breaker will stop the speed, but at the same time it will not give a jerk. Similarly, weld reinforcement has to be a little higher than the parent metal, but at the same time it should not be too sharp or it should not be too shallow to avoid any sudden change in the profile of the external surfaces. The other common defect what we look for is just besides the edge of the weld, which is called as the fusion zone between the weld and the parent metal, and this has to be free of undercuts. Undercuts is the area which is exposed to the arc, the high intensity heat, and that area is actually gets molten, but the liquid metal what we pour or liquid metal what we melt through the filler wire doesn't go to this area which is over arced or over evaporated, and that remains kind of a small cavity. Mostly these are all linear or half moon kind of cavities which are not filled fully, and if welder is very particular and if he is weaving, if he gives proper dwelling at both the ends, or if he is moving without a weaving, a stringer bit, then his arc length will decide that. If arc length varies, then once again you are likely to get these undercuts at either side of the edge or both sides of the welding edge. The last thing to see in weld visual inspection is the start and the end point. So a start point should be smooth. Similarly, the end point crater should be smooth. Both should be not having any discontinuities, defects, cracks, porosities, and a good upslope and good downslope on the newly electronic machines will many times give you such a smooth arc at the start as well as at the end, that very difficult to identify many times with a very highly skilled welder which is the start point and the end point. They will match it so well, but still it is essential to see the inspection, how the start and the end point, because these are all the potential points where the defect can come, and it is also a point where suddenly the heat is going to come and suddenly the heat is going to stop. So metallurgically also these points are not that good. One more aspect, after this welding we have to also see that there are no clear evidences of any discoloration or any identification marks on the heat affected zone. And whenever we have a joint touching to the another joint, like a T joint, you have a longitudinal seam and the other surseam which comes and matches it. So either when we are doing the surseam or when we are closing up the weld seam, long seams, then it is essential to see that how this joint to joint has been properly fused, because this is another potential point like the start and the end point. This is also a start point as well as it is starting the welding or ending the welding on the weld itself. These are not good metallurgically, and that's why a close and 100% inspection of these points usually becomes essential. Then you go through all across the weld joint. Then comes the destructive test. This destructive test in weldings are mainly used when we are going to qualify our procedure. Now, what is the importance of qualification of a procedure? Some of the codes have already pre-qualified materials, consumables, parameters and the processes. That means if you use on a carbon steel which is graded as per one of the ASTM or ASME standards, and if you are going to use a consumable as per ASME section 9, and if you are going to use a prescribed current as given by the manufacturer, then you don't have to qualify a procedure to find out whether after welding are you going to get the desired strength. But in our aerospace we always look for qualification of the plate level. Then we also do lots of mock-up and ensure that we are getting properties, we are getting fusion, and that is where the destructive test comes in picture. Destructive test cannot be conducted on actual job, and whenever the actual job is required to be tested, we always use a production test coupon, and that is almost attached along with the joint, or it is welded in the same setup, in the same current, in the same filler wire, in the same environment, and within the shortest possible time gap between the actual job and the test plate. And then these plates are then destructed. The most common test on these plates in the destructive test is a tensile. You pull the prescribed specimen and find out what is the value at which it breaks, what is the graph it gives, what is the elongation it will give. And once you are confident that your welding is meeting 90% or above strength of the parent metal, then you qualify that weld. You say that weld is meeting the strength criteria. Similarly, we have impact test, we also do shear test, or we do some kind of reduction in area. It's a tensile strength only, but instead of elongation you find out what is the original diameter and reduced diameter at the neck. So the difference between the two gives the percentage of necking and the percentage of reduction in area, and these are all different indications of how the actual job is going to behave in various conditions. Another destructive test is micro examination. You actually cut the sample and you do microscopic examination, check whether the bond lines are properly fused, or you check what is the grain structure you are getting, or how is the dendritic structure which is coming in the parent metal heat affected zone, and what is the fusion line, is fusion line very sharp. So these are all the tests which we do it in a destructive test. The third level of tests are the non-destructive tests, and these are something which is very essential and important for us, because after the procedure is qualified, which takes about 1 to 2% of our initial time frame or the cost aspect, but rest of the 95% of the time we are going to use non-destructive test on our job, and based on this non-destructive test we are going to certify whether our weld is sound, good, and based on the WPS and the same parameters being followed on the actual job, we are going to certify whether the weld is going to meet the strength and other critical parameters for which the designer has taken consideration. So one of the simplest tests which is performed immediately after the welding, when the welding cools down, is the red penetrant test, red dye penetrant test. In this we apply a special red dye after properly cleaning the weld surfaces. It is applied on the surface, kept for whatever 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes depending upon the recommendations of the manufacturer and the set procedure. Then you clean up the entire die. If there is any void, cavity, crack, porosity or any other defect, this die, because of its very low surface tension, gets pulled into the defect, and when you wipe out on the top, all the extra dye which has not gone inside the defect gets cleaned up. Surface becomes absolutely no dye on that, and then you apply a white color chalk powder which is able to suck back this dye which has gone into the defect, and that defect is so thin, tight at micron level that visual or even at 10 magnification, 20 magnification cannot show or demonstrate it. As the die comes up, it's a very clear indication that the weld what we have performed has some kind of a defect. Now depending upon the shape of that oozing out of the die onto the white surface tells us whether it is a porosity, a crack, a linear indication, a rounded indication, or what kind of a defect it is. If we are getting ring type of thing, it may be some kind of a inclusion, either a tungsten inclusion or any other foreign particle which has not properly melted and fused along with the rest of the material. So the red dye penetrant is used like that. It has its own sensitivity, but if you want to really have a good sensitivity, then many times we use fluorescent dye penetrant. In this fluorescent dye penetrant, instead of red dye, we use a special dye which has a fluorescence in it, and under the ultraviolet light it will really show up, even if it is in a very very small quantity or minute quantity. Where the red dye penetrant cannot enter, the fluorescent dye penetrant can enter. Where the red dye penetrant cannot bring contrast on white surface, the fluorescent dye penetrant can bring the contrast on that white surface. And since you do it under the dark room, it really glows like electric lamp or something like that, and you can find out even the finest, very tight, few micron level cavities or porosities in this fluorescent dye penetrant. It's a very sensitive process, has to be done very carefully as compared to the red dye. One can do it very easily with untrained, but fluorescent dye penetrant requires qualified people to do it, and requires a proper infrastructure and ambience like complete dark room to see it. The next non-destructive test which is very commonly used is radiography. Now in this, the job is kept on the one side, a radiographic film attached along with the job with all the numbers, markings which are required for its easy traceability, and from the other side you are going to put a source which will give X-rays or gamma rays. Either through a tube X-rays will come, or through a source the gamma rays will come, or even there are other kinds of rays which are coming up now which has a good penetrating power for very large thicknesses, and the strength of that source in terms of Curies will decide what is going to be the exposure time and what is going to be the film development time. After it is exposed, this film is then put through various chemicals, and that will indicate to us a contrast. If there is a void cavity, this X-rays will pass through easily, and when there is a sound material, it will not go through the same extent, and this will make exposure on the film differently. A defect area will get exposed more, solid rock solid material will not expose it more. That means X-rays will not reach up to it, so the film will be intact. The X-rays will not react with the chemicals on top of it, and then when you pass it through the various chemicals, it will be printed like our printer prints through on our white paper. Now this is viewed against a light, and then one can easily see any defects, voids in that. Many times small defects, voids which are there cannot be seen through, and then you require a good contrast, a good penetrometer visibility. So exposure of a film, development of a film, and then its interpretation of the film is also a very skilled job, and only qualified people are allowed to do that and interpret and give us the performance of our weld. Next process which is used is ultrasonic testing. In ultrasonic testing, we always try to work with a probe, different types of probes, straight probe, angle probe, reflection probes. Two probes simultaneously sometimes are used, and one sends and transmits, another one picks up the signal, and then you match what is the loss in that signal, and the loss in the signal is due to the cavity or a gap or a void or a defect which is there inside. It will absorb and keep the rays over there. A sound material will transmit the waves. Now each material has its own different structure, microstructure, and its own density, conductivity. So similarly, the X-ray or the ultrasonic waves also transmit in different materials differently, and you have to choose the right frequency and also the correct amplitude to get the maximum sensitivity of these defects. A standard block, like we have penetrometer in X-rays, a standard block with known hole at known depth is used, and then you move your probe and qualify the machine, because the machine display is nothing but just an oscilloscope, and it is only going to display what kind of signals we are going to receive back after having a reflection. So every time you choose a new material, new thickness, you have to use a master with known dimensions of defect and calibrate your oscilloscope for the sensitivity you are aiming, and using that then you take it on to the actual job and move it across. And there is a couplant, either water or a grease is used as a couplant, so that the transmission of ultrasounds from probe to actual job becomes almost 100%, and similarly the pickup also is 100%. And this is the way the ultrasonic test is being done. It's very laborious to do ultrasonic test. You have to physically move and keep on watching on the oscilloscope, unlike X-rays where you expose a large film and then view it comfortably and then go back and trace with your job whether it is correctly matching and interpretation is right. In addition to that, we have eddy current, and there are many other non-destructive test methods, but in aerospace we are using red dye penetrant, normally not used on aluminium but on steels. Then we have fluorescent dye penetrant used almost on all parts. Then X-rays, once again almost on all parts. Ultrasonic, once again almost on all parts. and AD current and other non-destructive test examinations are used as and when required, and when we want to do extra. I forgot one more test, which is a magnetic particle test. So the subsurface defects are being seen by the magnetic particle. You have the job and then put two positive negative probes, create an electromagnetic field. This electromagnetic field will be uniform if there is no defect, but gets disturbed if there is a defect, and you try to find out that by putting a special powder and making the waves will actually pull the powder in a particular fashion, and when there is a defect, that pattern will be disturbed, and you come to know that here there is a defect, and this defect need not be on the surface, but defect can be subsurface up to 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter deep from the surface defects, which are not possible to detect in fluorescent particle or red dye penetrant, is possible to do it in magnetic particle. So this brings to another topic, that no destructive test per se is complete in itself. Always there are limitations in each of that. So it is recommended that if you want to have a good interpretation, minimum 2 non-destructive tests are required to be conducted. Like when you do X-ray, if there is a very tight lamellar gap, this will be missed out. You cannot see this in X-ray because it is so tight that X-rays will not differentiate between a good material and a defective material. But the same thing, ultrasonic will catch up very fast. But ultrasonic has a limitation that surface and subsurface defects are many times not seen clearly by the ultrasonic. So there you use either fluorescent dye penetrant or a magnetic dye penetrant. So if you follow and do a fluorescent dye penetrant for all the surface defects, subsurface defects by magnetic particle, if material can get magnetism, if that is not possible, magnetic particle test cannot be done, then you go for X-rays and try to take a very gross level defects, but it is only a 2-dimensional image which is going to come and not 3-dimensional. So the depth analysis is not possible, and very tight lamellar kind of a cracks cannot be seen or tears cannot be seen. So you substitute by ultrasonic test. So these 4 tests, if judiciously used, depending upon your thickness, the joint configuration, difficulty in interpretation of each of these entity, one can really have a good understanding of how sound is our weld. And when we have a sound weld, and when we know that we have used the same parameters which we have qualified in WPS PQR, so overall we can say that my welding is good, successful, and it will meet the designer's expectation. The last point in the inspection is what we studied in the distortion. So a quick dimensional check of the weld joint always helps in saying that not only my weld is good, but it also meets designer's overall geometrical tolerances which are there on the job. So without forget, I recommend you that don't concentrate only on visual or on non-destructive test for a production weld and destructive test for a developmental weld, but also look for the dimensions. What is the overall shrinkage, what is the overall distortion or deformation the weld has given, whether I have maintained the concentricity, whether I have maintained the profile, whether I have maintained the linearity, the smoothness in the weld joint. Is there a dress up required? So sometimes you may require some penetration or reinforcement to grind off, to make it more smooth and make it more acceptable as per the standards, and the profile should be a good transition profile rather than sudden interruptions in the profile. So these are some of the areas which a visual inspection and overall inspection activities are required on the welding. I have to also stress in this that there are 3 types of inspections which are done. One is before welding, whether the joints are good, setups are good, everything is clean, neat, degreased, no surface defects. Then there is an inspection which is done during the welding. So are we using the correct current, speed, voltage, sufficient gas, is shielding correct, is the torch angle correct, is the filler wire correct diameter. So these are all the inspections which are done during welding. And post welding, whatever we just discussed in the last 20 minutes is the one what is discussed on that. So I hope this is another 20-25 minutes video which you liked it on the welding, and we will go on further developing this lecture series like this to make welding as more interesting and understanding so that we can perform better. Thank you.